My name is David Plummer. I am a producer and contributor on the television show Windy City Live on ABC7 Chicago. More importantly, though, I'm also a living donor. The reason they wanted me to be here is because I'm a living donor. And in 2007, my dad, Ray, his kidneys started to fail, and we were sort of faced with a really grim forecast. He was going to a different hospital, and essentially, it was either find a match within your family, get your family tested and find out if there's somebody that can donate to him. If that doesn't work out, then you've got about a 2 to 5 year wait to get that new kidney. So that was not something that our family, and my mom specifically, was willing to accept. And she really sort of is the silent hero in this, and that she continued to fight for my dad when I know that, I think we may have just accepted it and said, well, this is just how it works. So she started to do her own research, started looking into hospitals, finding out everything she could find out about transplants, and that was the time that she found out about Northwestern. Now, before I go on, this is not a story of in memorial of my dad or anything. My dad's right here. If he could stand up for a minute. Every table in this room tonight has a story like that. Some of them more amazing than what we went through, and a lot of people to thank. Especially the Northwestern staff, the doctors, the nurses. I mean, they gave my dad a second chance at life, a second lease on life. They gave him a chance to meet his grandson that we had, just a couple years later, to make new memories with our family, with my kids. It's something we can never thank them for enough and can never repay them for. So I just want to thank everyone for that. And we're happy that you're all here. It's beautiful outside, but the sunshine is right here in this room at every one of your tables. So. We're going to move on with the program. It is my distinct honor to introduce this incredible advocate and ambassador for organ and tissue donation. Please welcome the 37th Secretary of the State for Illinois, Mr. Jesse White.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me an opportunity to come before you today. As was indicated, my name is Jesse White, and I serve as your Secretary of State, and I want to thank you for the job. I'm also a patient at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. At the time when I was a lawmaker, I was on the board of directors, and I think that Mr. David Eberhard was the Supreme Commander, and then Mr. Gary Mecklenburg. And Jeff Trunsky happens to be my doctor. I guess some of you probably know him. It's an honor for me to be here with you today. Mr. David Plummer, he is with Windy City Live. Mr. Michael Abacus, he's the doctor at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. He's part of the Comprehensive Transplant Center. And Mr. Dan Dickinson, chairman of the Northwestern Transplant Advisory Council. And you have the staff of this wonderful institution of healthcare. Along with the fact that we have Ms. Connie Bolton. Connie Bolton is the director of the Organ and Tissue Donor Program, the registry for the Secretary of State's office. And then we have Kevin Smunt, who is with Gift of Hope. He's over there. He is my partner in this effort. My effort is to try to sign up as many people as I possibly can here in Illinois so that when the moment arrives, others can benefit from their generosity. And so they have the responsibility of meeting people in the hospital setting and encouraging their loved ones to take part in this program. When I first became the Secretary of State in 1999, when individuals would come to one of my 138 facilities, we'd ask, would you like to become an organ donor? We'd say yes. We'd ask you to sign on the back of your driver's license. Have 2 individuals sign on as witnesses, so when that moment arrived, there would be smooth transition. Well, we found that 20% of those organs were not harvested because of the stress of the moment or the thought of losing their loved ones on behalf of the people, the loved ones of the family. And so we went to a new order of business called First Person Consent. So if you sign to become a part of this wonderful program, we will honor your wish. Right now, I just want to thank this wonderful, wonderful hospital and congratulate them for their 50th anniversary of transplant care. Every April is Donate Life Month, but we always roll out a commercial promoting the organ and tissue donor program. If you go to the theaters, if you watch television, or if you listen to the radio, you will hear the commercial. The commercial is centered around heroes. Let me tell you about some of my heroes. First of all, many times when you think of a hero, you think of someone who has helped to extricate someone from an automobile crash, save someone from drowning, rescue someone from a fire. Those are heroes. But I could share with you some of my heroes. We honored a teacher at the Loyola Medical Center. Better yet, we honored a doctor at the Loyola Medical Center, and she gave her patient her kidney. We honored a teacher in New Lenox, Illinois. She gave her student her kidney. And then I coached a team called the Jesse White Tumblers, and one of my tumblers was coming out of the Fort City Mall and was shot and killed by a gangbanger, and as a result of that tragic situation, 6 of his organs were used for transplantation purposes. And then we honored a teacher in Texas. She gave her student's father her kidney. So we have a lot of heroes out there. We just hope that you will sign to become a part of this program. In Illinois, we have 5.5 million people who sign to become organ donors. Having there are 5,000 people on the waiting list as we speak, and each year about 300 people die because the organs have not arrived in a timely manner. We ask that when you're alive and well, give blood. You're no longer here, give organs, and when you've done those two things, you've made a positive impact toward society. And certainly the fact that one person can provide life or improve the quality of life for 25 individuals. You may not have a need today, you may not have a need tomorrow, but sometime during your lifetime, you're someone that you may know will have a need. We just hope that when that moment arrives, that there'll be an adequate supply of organs available. Many people ask, how do you decide to become a part of this program? Well, it's simple. You can come to one of my 138 facilities and indicate that you'd like to become a part of this program, and we'll put your name in our database. Or you could go to your website, www.lifegoeson.com, www.lifegoeson.com, or go to your telephone, 1-800-210-2106, 1-800-210-2106, and then you can decide to become a part of this wonderful, wonderful program. In closing, I want to share with you some of the myths that are out there. Many times people say, I don't want to sign up to become a part of this program because I know that the doctor who is having this hospital setting will not put forth a genuine effort to save me because they want to use those organ tissue parts to give to someone else. And that's a myth. Or they'll say, I will not look good in my going away. That too is a myth. Or they'll say the rich man's going to get his organ before I get mine. Again, a myth. So I just want you to not buy into the myths, participate in this wonderful program. And I have a philosophy of life that says that when you come through this world and become successful, you give back. I also believe you should do something good for someone every day. So again, to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, I want to thank you for your giving and caring spirit and for making a difference in the lives of those in need. Enjoy this wonderful day, and above all, only the best to Northwestern University.
Our next speaker really needs no introduction to those of you who are familiar with the Transplant Village. He's a grateful patient of Northwestern's transplant program. He received a new liver in 2011. He chairs the Transplant Advisory Council. He's a trained pilot. He likes long walks on the beach, and he's just an all-around really, really nice guy. So please put your hands together for Mr. Dan Dickinson.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Secretary White. I don't know of a transplant event that if you asked Jesse White to be there that he wouldn't attend. He's been a very vocal advocate of the transplant community, and we thank you for that. I'm not sure where I have this long walk on the beach or with who, but thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge some people here today, and the list is a little bit lengthy, but I think it's necessary because if it wasn't for these people, we would not be having an event today. And these are the sponsors, and Marcia, and if you could raise your hand, I would appreciate it. I won't ask you to stand. Marcia and Tom Goldstick, Craig Hackendahl with INAV Group, Crane Construction, Lifting Gear Hire, Marilyn and Robert Day, Jeff Benham, Janice Brumer, Lori and Chris Fredrickson, Meryl Pinsoff Goldfab, and Gerald A. Goldfarb, Arthur Guterman, Aline and the Honorable James L. Kaplan, The Lake Family Foundation, Sarah and Abram Marcus, Sheila and Harvey Medvin, Sabine and Daniel Miller, Corrine and Larry Richmond, Louise Schiff, Dr. Jackie Siros, Dr. Michael Mekaloff, Marcy and Mark Simon, Lois and Julius Bagnardi, Janice and Daniel Straczynski, and Leela and Robert Tickman. Thank you all. They were the sponsors of our event today, and we thank you. And Marilyn and Paul Tran, excuse me. This would also not be possible without our transplant advisory group. We've put together a great board. We have about 24, 25 members on our board, something like that, who have put in their time and effort into Transplant Village and making this a success. I would appreciate if all the board members would stand and be recognized. Got to stand up. Now, we have some special artwork here, and before you leave, I'd like you to go see it. If you go out the door and to your right, there's I'm going to call it a mural for lack of better words. This is going to be hanging on floor 19 at the Transplant Center, and it's messages to the docs, to the physicians, and to the new patients coming through that are going to sit through their little session, day-long session, and be scared. They can look up on the wall and see those words of inspiration from you. So what I'd like you to do before you leave is go by, take a look at it. There's pins there, pick your favorite color, and write a note. There's also private notes in case you would like to leave a word for any staff member or any physician and make it private. You can write it out, lick the envelope, put it in the box, and we'll make sure that they get them. Dante Miron donated the artwork. He's a Chicago artist, well-known Chicago artist. I looked him up on the internet. He also owns a shop on North Broadway called the Spare Parts Store. And I don't want to go there, but I think he has a lot to do with transplant as well. And of course, I'd like to thank Dr. Abacassis for being here today, because if it wasn't for him, a lot of us wouldn't be here. And thank you to Colleen Martin, who is on our console. Terry Martin was our DJ today, so thank you. And Dave Plummer, thank you for being here today. When you came in, there were some little pins, and it kind of identifies who you are, because you really fall in one of these categories. And it's kind of an icebreaker for the table, so you can look the guy next to you and say, oh, you're a liver guy, you know, and what do you have in common? Or you're a kidney guy. So how many transplant patients are here today that have received an organ? Okay, wow. Okay, now how many live donors? I guess they're the only ones that would be here. The live donors. You are the real heroes. To the best of my knowledge, this is probably the largest group of transplant patients that I know ever to get together, especially in a non-clinical environment, which is kind of nice, isn't it? Where there's staff, our physicians, our nurses, the people that made a difference in our life. I know there's nurses here from 11E. A lot of these nurses have been there for 20 years. This is an opportunity for us as transplant patients recipients, donors, and families to really say thank you for all you have done for us. I'd like all the staff, including, there's some that aren't staff anymore that are retired that are here, that started a lot of these programs that are here as well. I'd like to ask you all to stand so we can recognize you. You know, I talked to a ton of people as I came in today, and it struck me that we all had our path, and we all had our different path that led us here, that led us to Northwestern Transplant. And everyone was different. We're all unique. All the patients are unique, and we all have our stories. Some of them are very touching. All of them, for the most part, are very, very emotional. And my story is unique, but it's probably no different than your own. In 1990, I realized I had a liver issue, and I decided to seek out the best. Who can I go to that I know would be the best physician to watch over me? And I ended up in Dr. Steve Flam's office. And Steve didn't mince any words. He says, you know, you're okay. He says, but there's a chance that you could have cancer someday, so I want you to go on a yearly scan, which I did. And after about 4 or 5 years of that, he says, you know, we got a little spot. We don't know what it is. I wouldn't worry about it, but we want you to be on a 6-month scan schedule now. So that's what I did. The spot got bigger, and then they said, well, you know, it's time to biopsy this thing. It could be cancer. So I had actually 3 biopsies over a period of 1.5 years. And after the 3rd biopsy, I had my call from Katie Turpin, who was my advisor, who I'm honored is sitting here with us at our table today. She's no longer with Northwestern, but she's certainly there in our heart. And she says, you have cancer, the big C. And I thought, okay. And I remember saying to her, I said, okay, Katie, just tell me if I get a transplant, that's a cure. And she said, yes. And I said, okay, so I get a transplant, and I'm okay. So I had visualized that I'd get a transplant. I'd probably have a year out of my life, or a month out of my life, and I'd put that on the shelf, and then I'd be okay. And I had this in my mind. So I did a great deal of research. I looked at every study. I had people doing research for me. I remember sitting down with Dr. Abacassis, and he was looking at some of the stuff I had, and he says, where the hell did you get this? And I said, well, what can I say? But I was an informed patient. I knew what was going to happen. I would like to think I was probably the most informed patient that had been through the center. And Dr. Abacassis only told me one lie. He says, you know, he says, we like it when you guys are so educated. And I looked at him, I said, liar. But between that and my faith, I had no fear. I knew what the outcome was going to be. And I was looking forward to it. I was looking forward to getting it behind me. And that was 18 months. And I had 3 or 4 false alarms, went in, got ready, only to be sent home, which I thought was a good thing because that meant there was a liver there, but this wasn't it, and there was a better one, you know, coming down the line. So March 1st of 2011, I had my transplant. The first month wasn't a lot of fun, but I'm blessed. We lived 3 blocks from the transplant center. My goal was, after my transplant, I was going to walk home, which didn't happen, but I did, after 2 or 3 days, and 3 days in the hospital, I did walk back for my checkups. During that process, and when I knew I was going to have a transplant, I thought, okay, if I have to have a transplant, somebody on the other side here has to be informed, and I have to be able to help somebody else go through the process. So the day I found out I needed a transplant, I started a blog. I kept the blog up, and I blogged the whole experience. If you want to Google Dan's Liver blog, it's all right there. I tried to put some humor in it. I've had several people come up to me today and say, you know, that helped me immensely as I was going through my transplant. And that's good, that's what I intended to do, but it really helped me more than it helped them. After my transplant, only about a month after my transplant, I sat down with Ann Murray and Dr. Abacassis, and we looked at the dynamics of the transplant population. And let's compare it to an alumni club, because we're part of this special club. We're in this alumni club, and you know, we didn't think we'd be here. We didn't necessarily want to be here, but here we are. Now, once we're here, what are we going to do with it? And we decided to start the Transplant Advisory Center. We had our strategic planning. We sat down with all the board members. We identified the unmet needs, and we decided to fill those unmet needs. So since we formed this, which has only been a couple of years, we started a patient assistance fund. We have some money in there. There's people coming through transplants where they're stuck in a donut hole. They don't have the money for the parking. And because of that fund, there's some people that have been able to have transplants that normally perhaps would not. We started our patient advisory group. We're starting a buddy system in August where we have a Shark Fest swim. So if you'd like to test your endurance, it's a Chicago Marathon, but we're going to swim. We're going to swim a mile, and that'll be in August. So we're meeting this unmet need. But the biggest need and our goal and our mission is to support the future of organ transplant. Support the future of organ transplant at Northwestern. So how do you do that? The Holy Grail and the most important aspect of our care and what has saved our lives has been the staff and the research that goes on at Northwestern. And it came to light the other day. I was in Wisconsin. I was meeting with a doc socially, and I mentioned to him, yeah, we've cured some people of hepatitis C. And he said, what are you talking about? You can't cure hepatitis C. That's not curable. And I said, trust me, because there's people in this room right now that had hepatitis C and it's gone. That does not happen in a vacuum. That happens through research. Same thing with anti-rejection drugs. There's people in this room today that are off anti-rejection because of the research that's done at Northwestern. Now, none of this happened in a vacuum. It happened because there's dedicated people on this staff who came here to further their craft and to further the science of transplant medicine. And Northwestern is on the forefront of all these initiatives, and they're exciting initiatives. And we could sit up here and talk about this for hours and not get bored. And there's people that blaze the trail for us in order for us to be here today. And at Transplant Village, our job is to support the future of organ transplant at Northwestern. We want to create a culture of philanthropy, and we want to create a base from which we can grow, and a sustainable base for raising money for transplant research. And we've already come a long way. We've already saved some lives, and we're going to save some more. It's our obligation, because of the people that blazed the trail for us before we ever had our transplant. Now we've been through it. Now we can look back and we can say, okay, somebody did this for us. what can we do for you? And ladies and gentlemen, that's what it's all about.
We're going to look at a video. This is folks from Northwestern, the nurses and the doctors, and also some folks from the Transplant Village talking about why the Northwestern Transplant Unit is such a special place to work and to be at. So take a look.
I'm blown away by the dedication and the commitment from the physicians and the staff at this institution. It just blows me away.
I think the greatest lesson I've learned is that no matter how long you have devoted time and energy to a specific career, you always have to remember that the ultimate goal of everything you're doing is to better the life of another person through medicine.
The biggest lesson that I have learned is we have to listen to our patients. They usually kind of know what the answers are. They know what they need and what they want. And by listening to them, it helps us improve our clinical practice.
I think the number one reason for the success of the program has been our innovation in a way that has had a mind on improving outcomes in the patient.
They're usually sick for a number of years. It affects their whole family. And to see them come back in after the transplant, seeing them smiling and going on vacations, enjoying their family, seeing them enjoy seeing their grandbabies being born, and it just makes it all worthwhile.
The biggest lesson I've learned is how priceless our patients are and how it humbles me every time I ask one to be in a study and they say, of course I'll be in a study, I want to help the next transplant patient.
What I love about being in the transplant department is that you treat these patients with their hope and you give them a new life. And this is what's really exciting about being a transplant nephrologist. And I just think that we, as a group of people, are viewed as their hope.
People are extremely brave and resilient. And when you approach people and you tell them, we have a solution for your problem, we can replace your organ, it's amazing that they don't run out of the room. They sit there and they listen and they go through all the necessary steps, and they do this with an admirable valor. And so I've learned how courageous patients are.
Our next speaker is the Chief of Northwestern's Division of Organ Transplantation, and he is the founding director of the Comprehensive Transplant Center. Please welcome Dr. Michael Abacassis.
There really are no words to describe what it feels like to stand up here and look at patients that we transplanted over 20 years ago with their families, and there just aren't any words, so I'm not even going to try. We do this having caught a very small glimpse into patients' lives. We do this in the clinic where the patient may be accompanied by a spouse or a son or a daughter, and we take a history and we understand a little bit about, yeah, they're married, they're not married, they live here, they don't live here. It's a glimpse. Or they're patients in the hospital and they're dying and we have to make a decision and we make our best estimate about what that person's circumstances are. And then at the time of transplant, usually more family members show up and we get a better glimpse, but it's a 5 to 10 minute conversation with the patient after they've had their transplant, and then we take care of them. But never do we get the whole picture like we do today. Today we're sitting here and I'm talking to people that I transplanted 15 years ago, 16 years ago, 20 years ago, 21 years ago, and I'm finding out all kinds of wonderful things, not only about what their family circumstances were back then, but what they are today, 21 years later. And that's why I said earlier, it's just impossible for me to translate that into words, because every single patient here has an unbelievable story. And it's not just a story at the time of transplant, it's an ongoing story. They are here, they're doing well. We all have our own problems and issues. They have their problems and issues, but they're here. And that's because a donor, whether it's a deceased donor family or a living donor, made the decision that their organs should be used for this. And that's just an amazing thing. And the good news is people who have transplants hopefully go on with their lives. And they have children and they have grandchildren. And they retire and they do things that are just what they should be doing. We're here today to celebrate 50 years since the first transplant in Chicago. The first transplant in Chicago actually occurred at Michael Reese Hospital, 5 days before the first transplant took place at Northwestern. So we're here to celebrate not only the first kidney transplant at Northwestern 50 years ago, but the first kidney transplant in this wonderful city. The first successful kidney transplant in the world had only occurred 10 years earlier in Boston. And it occurred between identical twins. And by the time the first kidney transplant was done in Chicago, there had been less than 100 kidney transplants done worldwide. Chicago really took a place in the history of transplantation. There were a number of people who pioneered this in Chicago. There are several doctors who decided to do this, and I'll come back to them in a second. Also, it took Passavant Hospital, Wesley Hospital, and Northwestern University Medical School to put together all they had to figure out how to do this. And it was really the first time in Northwestern's history that a team from all these different places got together and said, we have to do this. And they did it. And we talked today a lot about team science. That was the beginning of team science. Doctors Bergen and Earl. Dr. Bergen was the surgeon who did the first kidney transplant at Northwestern. Dr. Earl was the chairman of medicine who established the first program in nephrology. Their children are here today. Their children are not children anymore, but they represent what these courageous doctors decided needed to be done. And if you haven't met them, you should meet them. And I was telling one of them earlier that all those nights that their dad wasn't home, this is what they were doing. They were planting the seed for this. And there are many other doctors. Some of them are here. Dr. Komlowski, Dr. Simon, they're here today. They were part of this team. They were part of making this decision to do something that at the time was absolutely insane. This is not between identical twins where you don't need anti-rejection medication. This was between people whose immune systems were different. And remember, the first several hundred transplants succeeded because of the fact that they were between identical twins. But the first transplant in Chicago and the first transplant at Northwestern were not between identical twins. It was really taking it to the next level. Dr. Del Greco, who's no longer with us, Dr. Bly, who's no longer with us. So many people. It took so many people and so much courage to do something that others said could not be done. And we're here to celebrate that. But we're also here to look at the next 50 years. And the motto for our campaign is that this is where tomorrows begin. And what does tomorrow look like in transplantation? For 60 years, the holy grail of transplantation has been immune tolerance. The ability to do a transplant and not have to take anti-rejection medication. At least a dozen Nobel Prizes have been won by people who have described how to do it. But it wasn't until a few years ago with Drs. Miller, who was here, Dr. Leventhal, that we've been able to actually do it. And we now have over 20, 30 patients in the clinics walking around having received a kidney transplant who don't take anti-rejection medication. They are tolerant. This holy grail, we can't call it a holy grail anymore. We have been drinking from this cup. How can that be a holy grail? It's no longer a holy grail, but it's certainly something that we need to continue to work to make sure that everybody who has a transplant doesn't have to take anti-rejection medication in the future. There's a huge shortage of organs. Secretary White has been his whole life an incredible advocate of organ donation in the state of Illinois. We lead the nation in terms of having that level of support for organ donation. It's not enough. It won't do. It's just not enough organs. We've become so successful at transplantation that the demand far, far outweighs our potential supply, including living donors. So we're doing our best, and we need to continue that because every donor who signs up is a life saved. In fact, every donor who signs up is multiple lives saved, and we have to keep doing that. But we also have to accept the reality that we have to think of another solution. And that other solution is to build organs. And we're doing that. Dr. Wertheim is here, Dr. Shaw is here. If you haven't seen the posters, you should go out and see the posters. We are starting to build tissue-engineered organs. And I'm hoping that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, if you need an organ, we'll make you one. And it'll be ready when you need it. And this is not science fiction, this is real. And why is this real? Because the Nobel Prize in 2012 was won because people have figured out how to de-engineer and re-engineer stem cells to be able to create the kinds of cells that you want. We have been able to take existing organs and strip them down of all cells, of all disease cells, down to the matrix so that we can reconstruct them in a bioreactor. And if you think that I've been drinking something or smoking something, there was a trachea transplant done several years ago that did just that, and there have been many since. This is real, this is happening today. But it needs support for the type of research that is necessary to advance that field. And I could go on. The future for transplantation looks extremely bright. And we have a new holy grail. And that is to build organs. And by the way that we're thinking about building these organs is these stem cells will come from the patient himself or herself so that it will not be rejected. When the blood goes through these organs, what it will see is the patient's own cells that have been engineered to coat that organ. So we're doing two things, eliminating the organ shortage and eliminating the need to take anti-rejection medication. I really want to thank, I can't possibly thank everybody who has put so much work into not just this event today, but a number of events this year. The celebration isn't just one day, it's going on all the time. I think it's a worthwhile celebration. I want to thank Secretary White, of course, for coming and joining us today. I also want to thank the Transplant Advisory Council and the Transplant Village for all of their efforts in making sure that our mission to advance the field of transplantation occurs. Dan Dickinson has led those people. I want to thank the Northwestern Memorial Foundation, in particular Steve and Dave and Ann and Shauna and the others for putting this together. And I'd like to thank you for, number one, for being an example of why we do what we do, and also for taking your time and for supporting what we're doing. But more important than anything else, and I said it in that little cameo, I think the patients and their families. Every time I go and tell a patient that, as I said, we've got a solution, and I start telling them what that solution is, it just amazes me how brave patients are and their families, and they just look back at me and they say, okay, where do we start? What do we have to do? And then we go through the process, and transplant sometimes goes very smoothly and sometimes it doesn't go so smoothly, and there's a whole bunch of bumps on the road that we have to deal with. And these patients and their families, they just stick it out, and they look to us and they show us the level of confidence that they have in us, and we tell them, things are going to be fine. And, we're 99% sure that they're going to be fine. And I have to be honest, sometimes we're not so sure that they're going to be fine, and we tell them. But just the courage and families sticking together and doing whatever needs to be done to get the patient to the clinic and the patient to the hospital, that is why we're here today. And I want to thank all of these patients that are here today and their confidence in our program. And thank you all for coming.
I want to remind everybody real quickly, I think this is my last time speaking with you today. On Tuesday, I hate doing like shameless plugs, and that's not really what this is, because you're really our core audience for this show. But on Tuesday at 11 a.m. On ABC 7, we're going to be doing a special hour-long show on Windy City Live all about organ transplants. Dr. Abacassis will be there, as well as some other great guests with some amazing stories about how these people are changing lives and how you are changing lives as well. So I just wanted to remind you of that. I'd like to invite up to the stage now the president of Northwestern Memorial Foundation, Mr. Stephen Falk.
Well, today is a celebration of gifts, and some are very obvious, but there's one that is not. I have been here for 13 years, and I must tell you, I work with a dedicated group of young professionals, and they embrace this community more than any other group we work with. They literally get excited to come to an event on a Sunday morning because you're all going to be here. And Shanice was out there in the bright yellow dress, and she was greeting people. Everybody is just so happy. I think they're just happy to be here because some of you have the gift of life, some of you have the gift of a loved one, and some of you have the gift of giving life. And when I was thinking about that, I thought, which of those is greater? The gift of giving life or the gift of receiving life? But all of you have been beneficiaries, and we are incredibly honored to work with you. On your table is material. This is as shameless a commercial as David's going to be. That material talks about how to make an estate commitment. We hope you will consider doing that. I teach that young staff that the measure of a person is how they treat someone who can do nothing for them. And I hope that you will think of that. You are the personification of that adage. So we thank you for being here. Dan, we thank you for your work. And I'll let you close it off. Please.
We appreciate you being here today. We had a great turnout. We have a lot of committed people, a lot of very happy people. And we appreciate your commitment to the Transplant Center and being here today. Stick around, socialize, look for somebody with a pen like yourself. Remember, outside the door, please sign, because this is for the future patients. Please sign the artwork with your message to either your family, your physician, or to the next person that's coming through the Transplant Center. So thank you all very much for being here, and good night.